Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. First off, we got some slightly confusing news from Airbus today. It is coming out with its own way to tally sales, and it says that it has 671 planes on order for 1997, which is more than Boeing. But when you look at firm orders, the number is actually much lower than that, and Boeing is ahead. Can you help us make sense of this?
Yes, there's several different ways in which you could perhaps calculate who is the leader. You could look at the deliveries done at the end of the year. You could look at the value of those deliveries at the end of the year, as well as some news sources were looking at the number of new orders during the course of 1997. From our perspective, we are looking at the new orders during 1997, where Airbus did announce that they had received roughly 671 orders during the course of the year, which constitutes roughly 55% of the number of orders that were placed during the course of fiscal 1997.
So you are giving credence to that 671 figure, which means that that puts Airbus ahead of Boeing, right?
Yes, if you will, for a short term. The ideal here, or if you look at last year, Boeing received 717 orders for new commercial aircraft. Each year you may have one company that may lead the other, but we still do look at the overall world market share, which we still find Boeing being up roughly around 70%. You could look at this year's a slight blemish of the 70%, but in a ballpark figure, Boeing clearly still holds the world market share.
Okay, so you still say that Boeing is the leader then. Boeing's been hitting some really rough times lately, though. It fell short of its scaled-down goal to deliver 390 jets last year. Did that surprise you?
Well, it was somewhat a surprise when they had the work stoppage a few months ago. And historically, Boeing has had troubles in times of ramping up production at a significant rate, as we've seen here over the last 12 to 18 months. So, you know, each year is not consistent year-over-year production. Of course, you would like to see that, but sometimes there are problems.
Okay, we're going to ask you to stand by, if you would, please, Glenn Stewart. We're going to be coming back to you. Welcome back. We are continuing our conversation now with Glenn Stewart. He's an aerospace analyst at A.G. Edwards in St. Louis. Glenn, before we talked to Steve Jobs, we were chatting with you about Boeing and the fact that last October it had to halt some production and lower its production targets. Just remind us what you think that says about Boeing's future.
Well, that says that, well, starting with today, is that you're needing to clean house to go forward. Currently, they have a tremendous backlog of roughly $85 billion of commercial aircraft that will take them out to the year 2000. So they have a pretty good feed and backlog to feed up on over the next several years. So what was maybe learned over a few months ago is that, hey, we have to get our house in order, and we have some planes to produce.
Do you think, are you confident that Boeing is going to get its house in order?
Well, the investment community is obviously anticipating that they will, and hoping so, of course. We are hoping that management will do the right thing, and so far it appears that they are on the right path. The company has been conducting monthly conference calls to discuss their strengths and weaknesses, if you will, in their production cycle, and so far I give them a C. They're not doing too bad, but I think it's going to take a few more months, and better yet, a few more quarters, until we're really able to see if these problems are subsiding as we anticipate and wish.
How much of Boeing's problems have to do with the weakness in Asia's economic and financial markets?
There's not a significant or material impact currently to Boeing. Historically, airliners do not base their aircraft purchasing decisions on currency valuation. To some degree, because it is a long lead cycle in that you order aircraft today, you will not receive it until at least 18 months out. So right now we do not see a significant or a material impact. If anything, the CEO, Phil Condit, had mentioned that there could be roughly 60 options that could be canceled from those Asian airlines, but
yeah.
if I could just let you know, the options are just the right to purchase an aircraft at a later date, and the street is basically looking at backlog.
Glenn, before we wrap up here, I want to ask you about Boeing as an investment. The stock right now is at $48 a share. Would you be a buyer of Boeing at these levels?
Aggressively. Anytime under $50, I think Boeing is a great buy. I still believe that the stock will be north of $60 12 months from now, and this will be on the heels of the production problems subsiding. And I do anticipate that occurring over the next 12 months.
Okay, a Boeing bull. Thanks very much for joining us today, Glenn Stewart.
But analysts believe a thumbs down will slow the merger process.
If the EU does reject the merger, it will postpone the Boeing and McDonnell Douglas shareholders vote. That may be pushed off by a few days, a few weeks. We're not really sure at this time. The EU can impose penalties and fines up to 10% of Boeing's annual revenues, which could be somewhere north of $4 billion.
When we have a war or threats of a war, you typically find the defense stocks to find a short-term rally. And then it's typically a few days, if not a few weeks later, that the market realizes that this is an industry where the sales are long lead.
Meaning, as with the Tomahawk order, the revenue won't show up on the bottom line for a year or a year and a half.
Most of the group is rated a whole. We are really more interested in the suppliers. Speaking of BF Goodrich and BE Aerospace, these are smaller cap companies, but yet they are trading at much lower multiples.
But depending on how this war turns out, a rethinking of U.S. defense strategy could rearrange the multiples for the whole industry.